Welcome to the Speaking Your Brand podcast, Danielle.
Thank you so much for having me here.
We recently worked together in a VIP day to create a new lead generation signature talk for you so that when you're going out and delivering your talks, whether they're in person or virtually, that you can really attract the kind of clients that are going to be the best fit for the work that you and your team do. So let's start there, Danielle. Tell us about Kickstart Accounting, your business, and how you are different than a traditional bookkeeper or CPA or tax accountant.
Yeah. So here at Kickstart Accounting Inc., we use bookkeeping as a vehicle to help business owners really understand their numbers so that they can better manage their business, make better business decisions. What I found when I started the business 9 years ago was that a lot of entrepreneurs, and this is different from my corporate days, entrepreneurs tend to run their business for taxes. They tend to look at their numbers for tax purposes. And I said, oh my gosh, guys, there's this huge opportunity as entrepreneurs. Like, we're missing out on what CEOs really can do with their numbers. And so we work with our clients to help them be able to own their role as a CEO. We work with a lot of accidental entrepreneurs who, as they are starting to embrace their role as a speaker and as a thought leader, to really be able to look at their numbers and make better business decisions that support their goals and where they want to go in their business so that they can really thrive.
And when we were sitting down to do your signature talk, of course, and I knew that you wanted to use it specifically for lead generation. So again, to attract the kinds of clients, entrepreneurs that are going to be a great fit for what you all do. But also, I knew that we needed to embed thought leadership into the presentations that you were doing because you're an experienced speaker, Danielle. You also do a lot of podcast guesting, which we're going to talk about towards the end of our conversation today about some of the other lead gen strategies that you use. So I know you've given a lot of presentations over the years. So why did you decide now was the time to come and work with us to develop a new talk?
You know, I think that as I have learned over the years, and I've continued to grow as a speaker and as a business owner, one of my goals for the next year is to level up. So, if I'm going to continue to speak, if I'm going to continue to be a podcast host and I'm going to continue to be a podcast guest, how can I take that to the next level? So that was really a big piece for me, was just really embracing becoming a better speaker, having better content, and really feeling confident. The other piece is that I want to over deliver. Like, it's just so my natural tendency to say, if somebody comes in to ask me to speak about a financial topic, I'm like, well, let me give you literally everything I know, every worksheet I have. And then I'm like, well, why aren't you guys all calling me? Right? Like, I gave you everything. Why aren't you all knocking down the doors for help? And they're looking at me like deer in headlights. And so I knew that I needed to work with somebody who was an expert to help me nail down what I was doing, when I was doing it, and how I was doing it, so that we could really capitalize on every engagement that we have. I get asked to speak a lot at group masterminds, in person, and I want to make sure that I am actually delivering value and not completely overwhelming people.
Yes. And I remember when we were working on your talk, you're like, I really want to make sure that we provide a lot of tangible takeaways for the audience. And, the worksheet. And I'm like, yes, I understand that. We're going to give them exactly what they need. Because again, keeping in mind what you said earlier, they're CEOs, they're entrepreneurs, they're small business owners. They have a certain role in the business and they don't necessarily need to know all the nitty gritty about bookkeeping and financials. Of course, they need to have some understanding to help guide their decisions, but they don't need to know the depth that you know and that your team knows.
Yeah, it was a really, I want to say, use the word fun, and I don't want anyone to laugh at me as I use the word fun here, but it really was fun to work with you and watch you pull out those pieces from what we were talking about, because um I wanted to give like, how can I serve everyone, right? So if somebody is doing DIY bookkeeping, how do I help them? If somebody is struggling with money mindset, how do I help them? If somebody is has they're struggling. They want to they're not getting what they deserve from their money team, from their CPA, from their bookkeeper. How do I help them? And in working together, I loved how you narrowed that down to very specifically, who are we talking to? Why are we talking to them? And what does that person, what is that woman, does that person need to leave with?
Yes, and then and as we were as I was asking you question and getting to know a little bit more about your methodology and the process that you use internally and who are your best clients. And then you mentioned to me about this idea of the spending gap and how so many entrepreneurs actually don't spend enough, or at least spend enough in the right places in their business. And when you said that, I had this like little ding 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 light bulb go on, because this is what I'm listening for as I'm working with clients like you, is like, what is that thing that I think most people haven't heard much about yet? It feels counterintuitive. Like it feels unusual to hear that. And I feel like that's what gets the audience to then pay attention. So, Danielle, for the benefit of our listeners, can you explain what is the spending gap?
Yeah, this was incredible. And I'm so glad that you picked this up because I feel like I have been talking around this concept for so long, but never actually understood what I was even talking about. So thank you for pulling that out of me. The spending gap, what happens is, especially as women business owners, we are falling into a trap when we are on social media, watching television, watching movies. We're being served this narrative that we are overspenders. Now, my Instagram hears me talking about this all the time. So it serves me up these reels nonstop, about my husband put me on a budget and now I'm going to Target and Starbucks and I'm spending all of the money. So we're getting these narratives where I am bad with money, I can't control my spending, I need a man to put me on. I need my husband. I need somebody to put me on a budget, and I need to be spending less money. So come off a social media platform where you just watched a reel. My favorite one is Trey Kennedy, and him and his it's him and him, but you know it's it's him and his wife arguing about finances and talking about her overspending, and they're throwing harsh comments back to one another, and at the end they say he says, I can't wait to have this financial argument again next month. So now we've just programmed, I don't want to talk about money. When I do talk about money, it's going to be negative. It's going to make me feel bad because it's rude. It's mean comments. I'm an overspender. I can't control myself. Okay. So now we come off of social media, the movies, TV, and as women, we come into our offices and we come to work. What's the narrative that you're telling yourself in your store in your head, right? You are telling yourself, I'm not big enough. I'm not enough. I need to control my spending. Who am I to invest in that? Right? Who am I to get help in my business? I should be able to do it all myself. And what happens is that then, as business owners, we're not growing our business because we're not spending money. I can't tell you how many clients have come onto calls with us and they'll say, "All right, Danielle, where should I cut back? Give it to me." And I'm like, "Nowhere. You should spend some money because I know you, girlfriend, you have goals and you are not going to hit those goals until we can start spending in the right places and align your business spending with your goals."
Yes, and again, like that is so and as a fellow entrepreneur, like I hear that and I start to think for myself, yeah, Danielle's right. Where should I be investing in my business in order to reach the goals that I have? So I love that that is your approach. So then as we were kind of thinking about how to frame up this talk, I know of course you already had a framework that you came in with, and you know how much we love frameworks. So and I know you do too, because
I do.
right. And so you had a framework, and so then we kind of adapted that framework so that we could give your audiences very tangible takeaways, things that they can look at and they can hold on to. And then the other thing is that I really encourage you to share more stories in your talk, specifically stories about you, not just about clients. Client stories are really important because, of course, there's such credibility markers. Plus, then the people in the audience see themselves in those clients. But I also encourage you to share some stories about you. How did you feel about that?
Well, when I first, did my dry run, I had recorded a dry run for you and I had sent it over, and my comment in my email literally was, "I don't know, Carol, these these stories feel off. I don't think that I'm making the point that I should be making here. I think that that story doesn't feel right." And you had commented back, "You're probably just not used to telling this much story in a speech." And when I gave that talk the first time in person, it's those stories that really connected, not just connected me to the audience, but they were the moments of almost relief. Yeah, remember, like, money is a hard topic to talk about, and it's a hard topic for people to sit through. So having those stories and giving the audience a moment to laugh or connect or to really see themselves in that situation, um, like, I just walked away from such a deeper connection with the audience. Now, it's not easy for me to be vulnerable. So I really struggled with this because, some of the stories that we had picked out, they're vulnerable stories. They're talking about my childhood, where my money mindset came from. It's, how that money mindset, maybe held me back, when starting my business and making those decisions. So I'm not going to say it's easy to always tell those stories, but overcoming that, oh, gosh, that beautiful connection with the audience.
And just even just you saying that it's a story from your childhood and growing up and how that shaped your money mindset and it feels very vulnerable, even though the listeners right now don't even know the details of that story that like you told it in your talk. But all of a sudden, I'm sure they just felt a sense of relief. Like, oh, Danielle's not perfect. She doesn't always had everything perfect with her finances and with her money mindset, even though this is what she does in her business and she has for a decade plus. And it doesn't mean that you're not an expert in what you do or your team's not an expert in what they do. But for me, it's like, oh, Danielle's going to get it if I come to her and I'm a little bit embarrassed or I'm a little bit unskilled or a little bit uncertain about what my finances look like.
Yeah, we're all really having a human experience together,
Yes.
and I think that, we're all trying to make this perfect, especially as experts. When we're speakers and we're thought leaders, sometimes we want to come, polished and put together and be able to speak from that place of, I know better. And really, my story is I knew better, and I still ended up in those shoes. And so it's okay, right? It's okay. How do we all grow together?
Danielle, tell us about Joe.
Yeah. All right. So Joe was my parents' family tax accountant. And I always say, if Joe hears one of these podcasts or something, I want to apologize, Joe, but you did really did. You need to work on your empathy, guy. Um, so he had done my parents' taxes for years. And so my first year in business, even though I'm a CPA, even though I know how to do the bookkeeping, I decided that I wanted some checks and balance in the business. And so I decided that I was going to have Joe do our taxes. Now, I had filed an extension that year because I didn't have my bookkeeping done for my first year in business until, you know, after the tax deadline.
Oh my god,
I'm
that's
with
so
you guys.
relatable, Danielle.
Yes. It's my first year in business. I was not using my numbers to make business decisions. I had to file an extension. So I'm on my way to Joe's office and I'll never forget it. It's hot, sticky. I have naturally curly hair. So I have like an afro in my hair. I was a single mom of two young kids at the time. And so Cameron loved lollipops. That's how I got him in the car. And so the car is sticky. I walk into Joe's office. I feel a mess. I feel a mess. And in his office, he still has the old paneling on the walls. He has this paneling on the walls, still has not changed. Like, Joe, update your office. It is still the same office from when I was a kid. And old school style, you sit there with him in person while he does the tax return, and he is shaking his head no at me. And at one point, he even said, "You really need to pay yourself more from your little business. You really need to do things differently this year. And I walked out of that office. Carol, I was so upset. I already felt a mess. And then to have this man shake his head no at me and tell me my little business, right? Like, did I need that any further? That I am not enough. So I walked out of that office and I said, I will never feel this way again. And I will make sure that no other woman ever has to feel that way either. And I did have to, Joe, to file my taxes one more time. And I dressed the part. Like I knew I had my stuff together. It was before the deadline. I wore high heels, straightened my, my hair. I mean, I went in there and I was like, bam, file this.
Oh, good for you. And notice how Danielle told the story, right? She described the scene, she did how she was feeling, what everything looked like, how what the dialogue was, how she felt. Great job on the
Yeah.
storytelling.
Thank you. Thank you.
All right. So you mentioned about that, one of the benefits of having a great bookkeeping team like you have, like what you offer, is helping business owners make better decisions for their business. And I know we had a few client examples in your presentation that we included. So can you share with us one of them? Because I think it will help the listeners to kind of tangibly understand what does it look like to use your finances to make better decisions.
Oh, yeah, we have so many of these stories. I think the best one is I had a client who we had been working together. So she had had her financial statements for a few months at this point. And she had decided that she was going to bring on a new revenue stream in the new year. And so we had put the bookkeeping in place so that we could keep track of the new revenue her traditional revenue model, and then the expenses as well. And what we found as we went through the year, now she was a monthly client, so she got financial statements at the end of each month. So she was looking at her numbers on a regular basis. What we saw is the debt on the balance sheet was increasing. And she was bringing in a ton of revenue, right? Like this new revenue stream, if you are only looking at gross revenue for the year, you would think, I am killing it, right? Like this is awesome. Except for that, we also saw on the balance sheet that the debt kept on rising. So after quarter one, we said, all right, let's keep a really close eye on this. What's going on? And what we found was that she needed to hire several contractors to help her deliver this service. And so she was billing clients half at the front of the project and then half at the end of the project. Well, the contractors were paid throughout the project. And even the cash flow didn't matter because the contractors were hitting issues and billing her for the issues. And she didn't, there was no way for her to control that. Again, thank God she was looking at this month over month, because in August, she sent me an email and she said, this is killing me to do this, but I have to shut this down. She needed to financially support her family, and she knew that. And she needed to shut down the new stream of revenue before her family ended up in a serious debt problem and maybe even on the verge of bankruptcy. And it did take her about 8 months after that. I know, like
Wow.
it could have been so much worse, right? It took her 8 months to make up and pay off that debt, but it could have been so much worse. If she had not looked at her financials and she waited until tax time and then saw it, and who knows, if she was just working with a CPA who was filing her taxes, that tax account would have said, "You're really profitable, and here's your tax bill for $20,000. See you again next year." Right? Because they wouldn't have even looked at the debt.
Right, because like you said, the revenue, coming in, that looked like it was going well.
Yeah.
Wow, that's an excellent example. I mean, also, and credit to you and your team for kind of noticing what was going on and then encouraging her to keep an eye on it as well.
As business owners, we all have a responsibility to care for our business. We all have the responsibility to be looking at our numbers, taking the time to ask ourselves some clarity questions, what's working, what's not working. So, credit goes to her for being the CEO of her business and taking the time to actually look at the numbers. Um, but she has a money team that was sending her accurate, on-time financial statements throughout the year, highlighting what she needed to know so that she could stay at a high level as the CEO and be able to look at those numbers. A lot of times what I hear from business owners, they'll say, "Well, yeah, my bookkeeping's current. I go in there and I update QuickBooks." Here's the problem is that what's on your to-do list is processing the transactions in QuickBooks, not reviewing your numbers, right? Like when you process anything in QuickBooks, your job as the business owner, it hasn't even started. Like, like you were never supposed to be doing that. And then it's probably not even right. So your job as the business owner is to be able to come back and say, does this make sense? What's working? What's not working? And so, yes, thank God she had the numbers, but thank God she was the type of business owner to say, I am responsible. I'm going to look at this information and I'm going to take action.
And the reason of why I like you including those types of examples, whether you're doing presentations or podcast interviews like this or on your own podcast, is now then you're attracting the kind of clients to you that are going to have that mindset and that approach as well to their business, because that's going to ultimately be a better match for what you do.
That is such a good point, Carol. And I think that, it sounds so fundamental, but us nailing that down in the first 15, 20 minutes of our VIP day together, that was fundamental because as you asked me about the stories, it made it easy for those stories to come alive and for me to pinpoint those stories, just keeping that in mind of who am I talking to and why.
Yes. All right. So then I have more things I want to talk to you about, including lead gen strategies, your podcast guesting, how you get the speaking engagements that you do. Before we go there though, let me ask you a little bit more about the process of the VIP day for you. And I have your board here. So for those of you who want to see the video, you can go to the show notes page for this episode and you can see me holding up Danielle's board with all the colorful post-it notes on here. What was this process like for you? How did it feel to sit there for 3 hours and basically answer my questions as I was writing on the post-it notes?
I'm going to use the word easy. So for me, it's really easy to talk. And I have a very hard time when people ask me to fill out a questionnaire. I think actually you sent me a questionnaire and I sent you a Loom video back. And I was like, Carol, this will take me all day if I have to write these answers back. And I appreciate you accepting my video so graciously.
It was totally fine, and I listened to it, and I just did a transcript of it, so I had everything that I needed.
Perfect. Perfect. So for me, the process felt easy because I was having a conversation with you. And as speakers, right, as speakers and podcast hosts, like that's what we're good at is asking, asking questions and being here and telling stories and speaking. And so I really appreciated that I could really just show up and embrace that role of it. And I am I've got post-it notes like literally everywhere. So as soon as I saw you with all the post-it note colors and stuff, I'm like, she is speaking my jam.
All right. So then I know that we had a pretty quick turnaround because you then had a speaking engagement coming up, which is why we did the VIP day when we then. Tell us about what that speaking engagement was like with this new material, with this new presentation, and how it went.
I'm glad that I had just enough time to practice it a few times on my own before I got there. So that gave me a little bit of the confidence. I did this particular speaking engagement in person, and it ended up being a smaller conference than I thought it would be, but as I mentioned, the engagement in the room was off the charts. I mean, I feel like I had everyone's attention, and there was a few other speakers there who really delivered more like tangible content, you know what I mean? More like handwritten worksheets, but people weren't as engaged with their talk. And so when I was looking around the room and watching their eyes, and I didn't lose anybody to the laptops. I didn't lose anybody to their phones. They were there in the room with me, which felt so good. And then that was record number of people who have converted to clients. I mean, I actually stayed at the conference for 2 days. So I spoke day one, and then I did a second talk on day two, and then I stayed for the morning after, just to answer any questions. And by being present and around with the community, we signed. I wish I had the specific percentage of attendees that actually signed, but I was texting with my operations manager on my way home. I'm like, give me my stat. How many did I close with this? Because it was just amazing to watch people come up afterwards and ask to sign up for our services.
Oh, well, congratulations, Danielle. I am so happy to hear that. And it's a testament not only to the content, again, this is all your content, right? We just put it in a flow that we feel like will work for you and your audience, but also it's a testament to your delivery and your ability to connect with your audience.
Well, I appreciate that, and I like send the compliment back the other direction. To me, it's a testament of you laying that out of what the format and the flow was, and helping me embrace the stories. I used to tell maybe one story, but you embracing that story format, or helping me embrace the story format, and really the PowerPoint too. I had stock images in my. I hated my PowerPoint. I mean, I didn't even want to use it, and the way that you helped us with the PowerPoint as well, I mean, the whole thing was incredible. So I give the compliment right back.
Oh, well, thank you. It was fun. Yeah, I enjoyed working on the slides with you too. Like, let's add some fun video clips and some images. And we opened up Canva and we did it. So yeah,
Yeah,
that was
loved it.
great. All right. So then let's talk about some of the other lead generation strategies that you use for your business. Now, you mentioned that you get a lot of your speaking opportunities from mastermind groups. So that either they could be clients of yours who are in mastermind groups, or maybe just other mastermind groups that you come across, conferences and things like that. So how has that happened? I know you've been in business for a while, so you've definitely been around, been on the circuit. So what would you say? Let's talk about what works well for you now, but then also let's rewind to what worked well for you when you were just getting started doing this.
Yeah, I think what's working now is really tapping into my referral partners and clients and the people we have in our community today. And I don't think I spend enough time or energy there. I was able to get quite a bit off of my plate in 2023, and so I've been able to embrace my role and how I show up in the company. And so I have a little bit more time and space to be able to connect with our referral partners, with people who I have on my podcast or people who I'm on their podcast. So a little bit more intentionality, and clients, right? So if my team hears of a client who has a group or a mastermind or a podcast, really connecting with them to say, hey, how can we be a resource for one another? So today, it's just really being part of the community.
Okay, and then what were you doing that worked well back in the beginning?
So in 2018, 19, I had did a VIP day with somebody who was a sales coach. And I always say the number one thing that came out of that VIP day. Now, I want to just touch on the fact that I've like on this podcast, I've told you about 2 VIP days that I've signed up for, right? And like, ladies and gentlemen, that's because we have to spend money in our business to be able to grow our business and thrive. Okay. So being willing to invest in my business. But the number one thing that came back from that, working with that sales coach, was she said, have you considered being a podcast guest? And so I had hired my first agent to pitch for us to go onto podcasts. Now, I've heard people say, yeah, I tried that. It didn't work for me. Well, it didn't work for me at first either. I had to spend some time figuring out what my voice was and what questions hosts had, how to answer those questions, how to lead with some intentionality. And so it is a strategy that we still use today and we've been using since 2019. And being a guest on your show, right? Like being here in this chair right now is literally actually my favorite thing to do in my business, because if there's one person who listens today and you get one thing from the podcast, it was worth my time and energy. And when you go and speak, especially live events, it's a lot of time, it's a lot of energy, it's a lot of travel. I have two young, no, they're not young. I have two kids, and um, it's a lot for me. But being able to come here and be on a podcast is a way for me to really be able to amplify and it being a little bit more of a time efficient way for me.
Yes, that is so true. And obviously podcast episodes live on for a long time, even forever in theory, and they're not one and done. So yes, I completely agree that podcast guesting is a great way to get your message out, to get in front of more people, and also to practice. Like practice different
Practice.
content, different messages, different approaches that you want to try out that you could eventually use for speaking engagements.
I needed to find my voice. I mean, it took me and so somebody listening to this could be like, "I already found my voice. I'm a speaker." But I needed to figure out what worked and what didn't work and what converted and what connected. And to me, this was a low risk way of practicing before I started to get onto stages, right? That felt like higher risk. And this was a way for me to be able to practice.
Absolutely. Now, Danielle, you also have your own podcast, The Entrepreneur Money Story. What is your approach to being a podcast host? What have you found effective for you? And how does episode 150 compare to episode 15?
So it took me about 75 to even figure out what I wanted to talk about. I was practicing and that's what I said when we started. I said, "Look, I do not believe in perfectionism paralysis. I believe that a B plus, a B minus, really a C is better than not getting started." So we just started. We started putting content in the world so that I could see what resonated, what worked, what didn't work, what were people listening to, what questions did they have, and it's morphed. At first, I said I'm not going to do any how-to episodes. I just want to do guest episodes. I want to talk about money mindset. I want to talk about money stories. Well, it took about 5 episodes before I completely changed that, and I said, nope. We're using this podcast as a resource, so my team can use the podcast as a way of answering client questions and everybody else gets to hear our answers too, so it's our way of being able to serve both the team, our clients, and the audience. So, I just believe in getting started and learning along the way, and I could never have seasons. I'm with you. I will stop and never get started, but I love podcasting. So for me, like, I'm like, are you kidding me? You're gonna like this is my job. I get to write content and talk. I mean, it's a dream come true. So
I agree. So the first thing is that I don't think I did a solo episode on my podcast until about episode 25, which is about 6 months into the podcast because and it sounds so ridiculous to me right now, but back then I was like, I don't know what to talk about on a solo episode, so I'm just going to interview my clients and different guests who I find interesting. Of course, now I think of a gazillion things that I can do for solo episodes, but like you, I considered it a resource and because like and being a speaker, like I always think of new things I want to present on. And so obviously I'm not going to go do a brand new big, slide deck presentation for every idea that I have. But guess what? In a podcast, you can just kind of like do your outline, go talk for 15, 20 minutes, and there's your new kind of quote unquote presentation.
I love it. Yeah, I have ideas all the time. I mean, as a visionary, that is, you know, I'm just busting at the seams with ideas. And a podcast is the best way that I can, I like to even think of it as a creative outlet. And I get to be here and have this beautiful conversation.
Maybe podcasting is a creative outlet, especially the kind of podcasting that we do, Danielle, for the left-brained, logical, analytical people, because that's how I feel like it is for me.
Yeah, yeah.
All right, Danielle, where is the best way for listeners to connect with you if they want to find out more about you and Kickstart Accounting?
If you go to kickstartaccountinginc.com/gift, we have some awesome downloads. You can connect with the podcast Entrepreneur Money Stories on there. So kickstartaccountinginc.com/gift is the best place. You can also connect with us on Instagram at Kickstart Accounting.
Okay, fantastic. And I'll make sure to include links to all of that in the show notes as well as to your podcast and the gift page that you mentioned. I have seen it because I was, looking as we were working together and it's really nice. Like you have a lot of excellent resources on there. So listeners, definitely go check that out. Danielle, it's been such a pleasure to work with you, to get to know more about your approach and your methodology and your thought leadership with your business. So thank you so much for coming on the podcast.
Oh, no, Carol, thank you for everything that you do. I've been a longtime listener. I'm so happy to have been a client of yours, and I appreciate the way you show up every week. So thank you.
Oh, thank you.